Dear friends, today we have with us Senator Dave Sharma, who is also the Shadow Minister for Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs. Dave, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the pertinent topic, with all the developments going on, in the world, like really uncertain times. How are these developments affecting Australia? And what would if you were in government today, what different policies would you apply than the ones that the current government is applying?
Well, look, I think Australia is more vulnerable than nearly any other developed nation, and certainly more vulnerable in India to the global energy shock that's happening right now. Why is that? There's a few reasons. Firstly, we hold very little in the way of strategic reserves of liquid fuels, about 30 days, significantly less than we're meant to under the International Energy Agency standard. Second, we've lost significant refining capacity in recent years. As some of you might know, we only have 2 operating refineries in Australia, which produce about a quarter of Australia's consumption on a daily basis. One of those refineries, one of those 2, has just gone offline because of a very bad fire in Geelong. So we've lost what more capacity we had. And we also extract and produce much less oil than we used to. So if you just look back 25 years ago, about the year 2000, at that time, Australia was about 90% self-sufficient in liquid fuels. We produced about 760,000 barrels of oil per day, mainly from the Bass Strait, and we had 6 refineries. But today we are about 10% self-sufficient, 90% dependent on global supply chains. So that means that we are much more vulnerable than nearly any other country, more so than Japan, Korea, India, the United States, Canada, United Kingdom, France, Germany. We're almost alone here, and as a result, the price impact has hit Australian consumers very quickly. And of course, it's not just households and individuals filling up their motor car. The price of fuel or energy is really in every part of the economy. It's in agricultural production, it's in food, it's in transportation, it's in travel. And so the price of everything is going to go up in Australia. And the last point I'd make is we were entering this crisis already in a high inflation environment in Australia. Inflation in Australia has been running at about 3.8% before this shock. The Reserve Bank was raising interest rates. So it's not as if we had much of a cushion to absorb this shock. We've already got an inflation problem in Australia, and this energy shock is going to make it worse.
And there's also a strategic implication to all of this. Do you reckon that Australia also needs to rethink its defense preparedness, in the sense that it's historically been allied to the US, but given what we are seeing, is it time for Australia to reconsider its defense arrangements and maybe forge an even closer relationship with India, which is probably the only non-hegemonic superpower today?
Look, I think it's very important, and I support strengthening all of our ties with India, trade, commercial, cultural, but also defence, strategic and political. India and Australia share an important interest in maintaining an open order in the Indo-Pacific. India has one of the region's largest blue water navies, and their naval capability is growing significantly year on year. And like Australia, they want to ensure that the seas around us, the Indian Ocean, the South China Sea, all of the oceans we use as countries to trade, remain open to trade and open to everyone to use, part of the global commons. And that's an important value that Australia and India share. And so I think there is a strong case for us increasing our cooperation. The other point I'd make is I think, what this latest episode has taught us, but other developments have as well, is we in Australia are no longer able to rely upon US naval hegemony, if you like, or the preponderance of US power to safeguard our interests. We need to be doing more in Australia to be prepared to defend ourselves and our own interests. And that means a bigger defence budget and a bigger security budget, but it also means more extensive and sophisticated security relationships with countries like India that share an outlook and a set of interests.
Yeah. And also, given your expertise in international affairs, Dave, where do you see this conflict going? Because it started off somewhere else, predominantly as a conflict between Israel and Iran. And we know that, the regime in Iran has often called for the elimination of the Israeli state, and it does fund these terrorist groups like Hamas. But it's taken a different form now with America getting involved, and now it's from the uranium, it's now gone to the Strait of Hormuz. Where do you see this going actually in the long term, and is there any idea how long this could go on?
Look, I'd say two things I think are important to note. Firstly, in my opinion, Iran has been an unstabilizing or destabilizing and a negative force in global affairs since the Islamic Republic of Iran was created. It has supported the use of terrorism abroad. It has fostered extremist groups like Hamas and like Hezbollah. It has close ties to Pakistan, as you know, and India has been the victim of some horrific terrorist attacks on its own soil from Pakistani-sponsored terrorist groups. So I think Iran has been a deeply destabilising force in the world, and I think to the extent that this military campaign has lessened Iran's ability to play that role, I think that's a good thing. But clearly, the globe's interest here is in the opening of the Strait of Hormuz and the freedom of navigation. And I think there's an important principle at stake there. Iran is basically trying to claim that the Strait of Hormuz, an international waterway governed by international law, which should be accessible to everyone, is their sovereign waters, and that they should be allowed to control who comes in and who goes out, that they should be able to put a toll on it, if you like, or extract a fee for any ships that go in and out, and they should be able to open and close it to traffic as they see fit. That's a very important principle at stake, and one that Australia and India and many other countries have a very important national interest in upholding the principle that the Strait of Hormuz and indeed all international waterways cannot be hijacked by any single country. Because there's a number of important straits in the world, the Malacca Strait, for instance, but also the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandeb leading into the Suez Canal, the Straits of Gibraltar. All of these waterways, there are territories on either side, countries on either side, that do not seek to assert their jurisdiction over those waterways. Even Turkey, with respect to the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles, allows the free passage of commercial shipping. I think that's a very important issue we have to uphold. And I think it's important. People say, yes, there should be a resolution to this conflict, and I agree. I'd like to see this conflict resolved as quickly as possible. But we cannot allow it to be resolved in a way that Iran is the de facto controlling power of the Strait of Hormuz. That would be damaging not only for that region, the Middle East, but it would be damaging for an important issue of principle that we all depend upon in India and Australia and around the world.
Yeah. And just to conclude, Dave, if I were to ask you one advice or, maybe 2 points you could tell the government currently that they could do in order to contain this inflation and, deal with the current crisis, what would that be?
Well, look, two things. Firstly, we need to secure more energy supplies. And at the moment, most of our energy supplies come from Singapore, come from Southeast Asia, Singapore, Malaysia, Korea, and they rely upon Middle Eastern crude oil, which is, a lot of it is blocked through the Strait of Hormuz. So we need to try and find ways to diversify. I think India is an important diversification partner for Australia. The United States is also, the United States is the world's biggest exporter of refined petroleum products in the world. And at the moment, Australia gets very little of that product from the United States, but that waterway is open. The Pacific is open for shipping and trade, so we should be doing that. The second thing I would say is the government needs to make sure they do not add to the inflationary problem in Australia. So the government here has given relief to the fuel excise levy. They've cut the fuel excise levy. We in the coalition supported that, but we thought that offsets or savings measures should have been found so the inflationary impact was neutralised. The government has chosen not to do that, and the result will be more inflation in Australia. Now, if you're handing out cost of living relief in a way that is only adding to inflation, ultimately you're circumventing the very purpose of your intervention. It's at cross purposes. And so we are urging that whatever the government does, it should not be adding to the inflationary pressures in the Australian economy, because we are all paying for that.
Dave, thank you so much for taking out your time today and speaking with us. And I'm sure we are going to be speaking with you soon again. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me on.